Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. The Prime Minister's comments to the National Development Council have created a storm of controversy. Did he make a mistake or was he misunderstood? That's the key issue I should raise today in an exclusive interview with the Panchayati Raj Minister and a champion of secularism, Shankar Aiyar. Minister, let me start with a simple question. When at the National Development Council the Prime Minister said they must have first claim on resources, who was the they he was referring to?
I think it's obvious from the context that he was referring to the disadvantaged groups in our society.
Well, you say it's obvious. What's absolutely clear is that the word they refers to an entity he would have mentioned earlier on. Would it be the entity mentioned in the preceding sentence, in the sentence before that, or two sentences earlier on?
Well, those who are motivated to raise a storm over words have decided to concentrate on the previous sentence. And those who are not interested in raising a storm but dealing with a social problem take the whole of the context. Perhaps the Prime Minister should have found the kind of speechwriter that Rajiv Gandhi had. But I really honestly don't think that there is any cause for this storm of controversy.
Well,
it's a contrived storm.
Let me pursue that and tell you why it's not a contrived storm. Because if the Prime Minister was really referring not to the preceding sentence, but to a sentence that occurred 2 sentences earlier, then surely, to clarify matters, he should have said all of the above, or he should have spelt out what he was talking about. Not to do so, but instead use the word they, is misleading.
But on the other hand, only those who wish to make a kind of political capital out of misprojecting what was said would need to be told this.
Well, that's not true.
Can
I interrupt? That's not true. And the reason it's not true is because every single English newspaper and practically every single Hindi paper the next day interpreted the Prime Minister to be talking about minorities and specifically the Muslims within minorities. And given that every paper did that, clearly they weren't doing it because they were being mischievous, they weren't doing it because they were, in other words, having a conspiracy, they were misled.
No, they were doing it because there was a time context in addition to a word context. The Sachar Committee report had just come out and it had revealed a very, very disturbing truth about our society.
All the more reason for the Prime Minister to have spoken with great care, to have used his word with great particularness.
Well, as I've already mentioned, that I'm not responsible for speech writing.
But are you also accepting that this was therefore a poorly written speech?
No.
The implication is clearly there.
The speech was an outstanding speech, and those who do not have an arrière-pensée in their minds could see that the reference, even if it was to Muslims, was to an issue that I think we need to address.
Maybe
that
so.
There is a disadvantaged group in the country.
That I will come to in a moment's time.
Okay.
Whether the reference to Muslims was justified or not. I'm talking at the moment strictly about the accuracy of the speech. You see, it's not just every single newspaper that was misled by the Prime Minister, and the list of newspapers is enormous. I've brought it here to show it you, right? But in fact, your own cabinet colleagues interpreted the Prime Minister exactly as the papers did. They too came to the conclusion that he was talking specifically about minorities. Let me read you. This is what A.R. Antole said. I agree with him completely because the Sachar Committee with its report has held a mirror to India.
Can you just add my name to that?
You did too.
I agree. No, I didn't say it then, but now that you say, I agree with him completely because of the Sachar Committee report.
Except for the problem that you and Antole are agreeing with something that the Prime Minister doesn't agree with. You see, this is why I'm raising this issue. Because 24 hours after, Antole said he agreed with the Prime Minister. You're saying it today, and Kapil Sibal said the same thing too.
I'm sorry, I said I agreed with Mr. Antole.
Okay, but Mr. Antole was agreeing with the Prime Minister, or what he thought the Prime Minister had said.
But
wait, this is important.
But Karan,
24 hours later, let me finish and then you answer.
Okay.
24 hours later, the PMO issued a public statement released to all the papers and television where it said that this was deliberate and mischievous misinterpretation, which clearly suggests that Antole and Kapil Sibal were part of the misinterpretation.
No. If you wish to make a storm over whether these words are right or wrong.
Not me, the PMO and its clarifications making the storm.
You can't have a program without a storm. So I want to make it...
You mean you say they did this so that I could come and interview you?
I want to make it completely clear that the Prime Minister intended to include all the disadvantaged groups, and it was appropriate that special attention should be given to one of these disadvantaged groups whose extent of disadvantage had just been brought into the public realm by an extraordinarily important report presented by Justice Sachin.
You see, when you say it at that length, and I deliberately didn't interpret you, the meaning becomes crystal clear. But when you think it's actually expressed by the misleading use of the single pronoun they, it leads exactly to the confusion. Given that confusion arose, shouldn't the Prime Minister's office, instead of calling it deliberate mischief, have actually issued a statement to say this was poor language, it was an inadvertent error, this is what the PM meant, and left it at that. Accept the mistake and get over with it.
I'm also not only the speechwriter, I'm also not the writer of clarification.
So you've disowned yourself twice.
Yeah, I am.
You've also accepted that a clarification along the lines I've pointed out would have been advisable.
I really think the more important, more relevant issue is whether, when the storm of controversy was raised, it was right to use the kind of language that Sri L.K. Advani and his cohorts used.
Well,
Can we get to that?
We will in a moment's time, but first let me persist with this. If a Prime Minister's speech to be understood needs to be subjected to textual or syntactical exegesis, then you must admit that that's not the sort of speech any politician, leave aside Prime Minister, is proud of making. Prime Ministers need to be crystal clear. You don't have to look through the context to discover what on earth is the man trying to say.
But I was there, and it never occurred to me that it would be interpreted in this manner. So, while there may be scope for improving the grammar and the language, let's get to the substance of the issue.
You concede that the language and the grammar were not as good and clear as they could have been.
Well, yes.
You concede that.
Yes.
You concede that.
Yes,
because the PMO's clarification didn't. You concede it.
I am not the speechwriter. I am not the preparer of the clarificatory statement.
Would that you were. This mistake wouldn't have happened.
I have come here to answer the storm of controversy raised later.
I'll come to that. Let me raise one other issue with you. If, in fact, the PMO's explanation is correct, for argument's sake, that the PM was actually talking about SC,
It's not for argument's sake. I'm sorry. Karan, I don't want you to go on twisting just these two words.
No,
I want you to concede to me that when the storm of controversy rose, it was in the context of Justice Sachin
no one can
having
deny
drawn...
it. No one can deny
I'm asserting it, not a question of not denying
I couldn't deny it. I'm asking you a different question, however. If the PMO's explanation is correct, that the PM was referring to SC, STs, OBCs, minorities, women and children, it then follows that the only category that was excluded were Indian men. Now tell me, is it fair and fitting that Indian men should not have a first claim on resources in the country?
Now, wait a minute.
It emerges.
It does not exclude Indian men. Please understand.
Right. OBC, SC, ST men are included by their minority status, and similarly, Muslim, Christian, Jain, Sikh, Buddhists are included because of their religion. Who are really excluded, and I was coming to that, are upper caste Hindu men, because they are the only category that don't fit in to the Prime Minister's broader description. Now, is that fitting and fair?
It's completely fitting and fair when you're thinking in terms of social categories to not look at individuals within a social category, but the general status of that category, first and foremost in economic terms, also in terms of social, educational, and cultural empowerment. Now, the fact of the matter is that in our society, an overwhelming proportion of those who have done well belong to the categories which have traditionally been higher in the social hierarchy.
Permit me an interruption to prove that you're overlooking 10% of upper caste men who by NSSO 61st round 2004-2005 figures fall below the poverty line. I'm talking of 20 million. Let me finish. Those 20 million are now doubly disadvantaged. First by economic status, and secondly because they're not in the Prime Minister's priority.
The paragraph refers to a priority claim on resources.
Right. And upper caste men don't have that priority claim, even though they're below the BPL line.
A priority claim does not constitute an exclusive claim.
Well, it constitutes a first claim, and you're saying that 20 million upper caste men who are below the poverty line don't have a first claim, category. Even though they're below the poverty line.
As a social category, if you read not only the rest of the speech, but you must, in the devil's advocate, give an opportunity for the divine representatives to say a word. I think it's extremely unfair that you conduct this in such a manner as to show the audience that you're the clever one.
Mr. Iyer,
Please
just
give us
because
an
I've boxed you
opportunity.
into a corner
Please,
where you find the
no,
defense
you have
is
not
difficult,
boxed me
you're
into
turning the tables in this slightly underhand
please
way.
allow me to finish what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
I'm saying that when we are dealing with social categories, they are recognizable in Indian society and they are the disadvantaged sections. When we are dealing with economic categories, such as who are below the poverty line and who are above, all of the rest of the speech and most of the approach is designed to include those who are excluded from the growth process, irrespective of their individual social category status.
Let me tell you that the message there for upper caste males who are excluded is the following, that you are not in the social category or in the economic category, so they must say to themselves, oh dear, I don't fit into two, I only fit into one. I can perfectly understand why I'm being excluded, despite the fact I'm below the poverty line, despite the fact I need assistance, despite the fact I'm an Indian citizen. I don't think that your words will be of any comfort to them. You've provided, in their eyes, a rather pseudo-sophistical justification for the fact that the PM forgot them. I'm saying that it's so much easier to turn around and say that there was a mistake in that speech. Full stop, leave it there.
I don't agree with you at all.
How could you?
Because I'm sitting in this chair instead of that chair. That's all. Now please take this seriously. There is a speech that consists of several paragraphs dealing with a paper that runs to several pages. In all of those, it is made completely clear that poverty alleviation leading to poverty eradication is the objective of the exercise. In the course of presenting that, he also says something that is well known to most Indians, if not necessarily to yourself, that there are large numbers of social categories which together might even add up to a majority, which are historically and sociologically disadvantaged in the country. Among those traditional categories, which have been repeatedly mentioned without any controversy, has been added the Muslim. And the storm of controversy has been brought about by a political party and a political leader who are communal-minded and have a communal...
is to blame for the fact that upper caste men feel left out, not the
I don't think
government
upper
that leads
caste
them
men
up.
felt I feel left
Those
out.
below the poverty line, 20 million of them are going to feel left out.
Oh yeah, I don't. I am an upper caste
But you're not
man.
below the poverty line.
Yes, but even if I were, I don't know of any.
If you were, your views would be different.
No, because the storm of controversy has been kicked up exclusively and entirely by the Hindutva forces, who always get into something
that I've shown you are Hindutva.
They haven't kicked up a frenzy. The storm of controversy which we are talking about is a storm kicked up in Parliament by the Hindutva
that's
forces
not true.
led by the BJP and Mr. Advani.
That's not true, but I won't quarrel with you. I'll let you have that as the last word. I'll actually take a break and I'll come back and talk to you about the substance. Because you're right. The substance, if it's contentious, is a lot more important than the words, which even you've admitted could have been better chosen. Let's take a break and come back and talk about the substance and the intention. Is that more acceptable or is that equally mistaken? Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an exclusive interview with Shankar Aiyar. Minister, let's come to the substance behind the Prime Minister's comments. Does the government believe that India's minorities, and particularly within that category Muslims, have a first claim on resources?
However, they are among the several social categories who ought to have a priority claim on resources by virtue of the fact that the Sacha committee was set up to ascertain what their economic and social status was and what their representation was in government service. And the report, it throws up two very interesting facets. That on the one hand, they really are a deprived community.
And secondly?
On several different indices. And secondly, that there has been some success in pulling a substantial number of Muslims above the poverty line, but still leaving them extremely poor.
Let me point out to you the only problem people have. No one would contest that Muslims need special attention and special care, but when you say a section of India, be it the Muslims, be it minorities, or be it a larger commodity, when you say a section of India has a first claim, ipso facto, everyone else becomes second-class citizens.
No, not at all. If you say the poor have a claim on our resources, does that make the
That's different to saying a first claim.
That is, it is look here, a first claim or a priority claim must necessarily in language have a second claim and a less priority
That's the problem.
claim. But it does not
Becomes a second claimant. You're making my point for me.
No, I'm not. Because I'm not, you are trying to extinguish the claim.
I'm not extinguishing it. I'm saying
you
everyone
are.
should have
I'm
an
afraid
equal
not.
claim.
Correct.
Why can't they have an equal claim? Why can't you say that the government will ensure it's equal? It hasn't been equal up to now. We'll make it equal.
I'm so glad they haven't made you Prime Minister. Would you have an equal claim for the poor and the rich, between the disadvantaged and the advantaged? Between those who have a better opportunity and those who have a less opportunity?
But
I mean, what kind of a mental attitude does this devil's advocate have?
Can I answer?
Can I ask you one question?
Pleasure.
Are you the devil's advocate or are you the devil?
Possibly the devil as well as the devil's advocate, if that would please you. But let me answer your question. You see, it's not a distinction between poor and rich for the simple reason that the government isn't targeting people in terms of their poverty and economic status. You're targeting them instead in terms of their social status, and there are many in that social status who are not poor and yet would benefit, which is why you have the opposite situation, which I talked about, upper caste males who are poor, below the poverty line, and being ignored. Were you to target people in terms of poverty, no one would complain.
Now, let me please tell you what you know, that 95% of the approach paper and more than 95% of the Prime Minister's speech was in terms of economic categories.
But this crucial paragraph was...
But in this one paragraph,
critical paragraph,
which has given you the opportunity of conducting this interview, there is a reference to a whole series of social categories whose relevance to planning has been well recognized. The new category introduced is the Muslims, and it has been done on the basis of an objective scientific study.
You refer to a whole category of people. These include women. Not all women are by any means poor. It includes children. Not all children are poor. It includes, in fact, minorities. Not all minorities are poor. Some minorities, arguably like the Parsis, are substantially rich. So clearly, clearly this is not in terms of poverty.
Well, why did you continue? It includes OBCs, some of whom are rich. It includes SCs, some of whom are rich.
Right.
It includes STs, some of whom are rich.
But it excludes poor, upper caste, below the poverty line males who need attention.
It doesn't exclude them as an economic category. It excludes them as a social category. And, Karan, if you're going to be fair, which is, of course, not your vocation, you will have to accept.
Do you realize that every time you speak in that manner, you're indicating to the audience that rather than answer the question, you're becoming personal to the interviewer? Is it because you feel you don't have a proper defense? Because it's your prerogative to be rude, but is that the reason you are?
No, I think if you can be rude, I can be rude. I want to draw attention, and whether I succeed or not, let the audience decide, to the fact that the approach paper, that much of the Prime Minister's speech does deal with economic categories, but where he refers to social categories, all these are well recognized, well established social categories, except perhaps for the introduction of the word minorities, which is based upon a specific scientific and objective study whose validity even you cannot deny.
I'll end by saying that the defense that the Prime Minister's office, and perhaps in a sense the defense you're putting up today yourself, echoes to my mind Humpty Dumpty in Alice in Wonderland, who said, I use words to mean what I want them to mean, which is perfect, except that it makes conversation very difficult and it leads to misunderstanding. Surely that's the problem here.
Well, it's been a great pleasure to meet Humpty Dumpty Karan Thapar.
Mr. Shankar Aiyar, a pleasure talking to you.